Is President Trump correct that as soon as the war is over, oil prices will drop like a rock?
Oil prices will definitely drop when the war ends, and it's clear that shipping can resume. But we're not going to return to the previous state of affairs immediately, and that's very clear. First of all, there's going to be a huge backlog. We're going to need to see the stores of various products, crude oil, but also various petroleum products, be refilled. And then there's also the damage that's already been done that has to be contended with. For example, Iran landed its first hit to an oil and gas field in the UAE. We don't even know how the extent of the damage, how long it might be offline. When it comes to LNG and natural gas prices and the LNG trade, it's going to take Qatar at least a month to get its facilities back up and running. So there's going to be some long-term reverberations of this. And so while crude oil prices and futures may definitely drop, we're definitely not going to see, return to everything as usual.
Yeah, I'm looking at futures many months out at this point, and we're still, if we go to December of this year, Ellen, for WTI, traders are still betting that's going to be $76.25 per barrel. And that's a price that we hadn't seen in years until earlier this month. So at least the way that traders are thinking about this, they're not looking at this. Either they're not looking at it ending anytime soon, or they're looking at the repercussions of this extending far beyond, quote, dropping like a rock.
Absolutely. I mean, it depends what dropping like a rock means. Does dropping like a rock mean that prices will be back, in the 80s or 70s? Yeah. Does it mean they'll be back? Does it mean we'll see $50 oil, which is what Trump claimed we were going to see right after, the Venezuela, debacle or the Venezuela victory, whatever side you're on. I'm not sure that we're going to see that. We will definitely see a drop simply because the danger presumably will be removed, but the long-term repercussions are going to be felt for a long time. I mean, agriculture, just backlog of products, this is going to take some time to unravel.
So talk to us about those longer term implications. When you say it's going to take a while, how long, Ellen? Are we talking a few months? Are we talking 6 months? Are we talking a year?
I mean, I think that the markets are incredibly resilient at rerouting things. So I think that we will see markets take the most efficient and best ways to sort things out. But the real test is going to be the extent of the damage. How long is it going to take to get these oil facilities? We don't know how much more is going to be damaged. We're still in the phase of Iran has the capability to destroy and damage oil production in its neighbors. And we don't know how much how much more damage it's going to do. The more damage it does, the longer it will take to to recover from this. So yeah, 6 months I say is probably a minimum.
What's more problematic? Some of those other Middle Eastern targets or, oil operations in Iran? And I only bring that up because the president did reiterate that the U.S. could knock out oil on Kharg Island, adding that it hasn't done so yet because of how long it would take to rebuild it. Nation previously bombed military targets on the key Iranian export hub, but spared its oil infrastructure. If indeed that happened, what would that do to energy markets short and longer term?
So I think that energy markets are really operating in general without counting for Iranian oil. So if all Iranian oil is off the market, I don't think that that's going to push prices up all that much because, it's really just China that is buying Iranian oil anyway. So, China is probably going to buy more Russian oil to account for a loss in Iranian oil, or it will buy oil from elsewhere. It would be great to have that oil available for the market and also for Iran when it's in some kind of rebuilding stage. But if that oil is off the market, I don't think that is going to have the biggest impact.
Ellen, if we are indeed, and we are a net exporter of oil, I think a lot of people have this misconception about what it means to be energy independent when a conflict many thousands of miles away that cuts off 20% supply of the world's oil has such dramatic effect on West Texas Intermediate. Can you explain that connection for people?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, oil is a global commodity and it's priced globally. So even though we don't really import all that much from Persian Gulf countries at the moment, what happens anywhere to oil impacts the price at home. Now, that doesn't mean that we're going to see shortages. I don't think we are in danger of seeing shortages of any sort, but because most of the price of gasoline is the price of the barrel of oil, we are impacted by the fact that when prices rise because of any kind of global incident, we are going to feel that at home.
Is there a way, though, for the U.S. to become more energy independent if we do, in the words of the president, drill more here in the United States? Or is the challenge, the oil that we extract here, or the oil that maybe we'll get from Venezuela, is not necessarily the oil that we can be using or we can be refining?
Right. I think that the best way to insulate the United States from the kind of price fluctuations that we're seeing is actually to become more oil interdependent. And I think that we do that by strengthening our connections within North America. One of the biggest reasons why we aren't feeling, these impacts beyond just in the price of gasoline and the price of diesel is that we have such a great interface with Canada. Most of our oil imports right now actually come from Canada. And so if we can strengthen our interdependence as part of the North American oil ecosystem, then we are either even better insulated. The other way to do that is to do more refining and to produce more diesel here in the United States, to produce more gasoline. California, for example, can only use gasoline that is produced and refined in California. Well, that needs to change, or California needs to have more refineries. The more that we can have our own refineries, and the more that we can do that, the better insulated we can be from global issues, and also the more we can help assist. We started this war in a sense, and we have the capability to assist other countries that are more impacted by it. And if we produce more at home and we produce more products, we can help other countries more by exporting.
Ellen, you mentioned Canada. I don't know if you've seen any of the stories over the last year, but we're having some troubles with that relationship, certainly with this White House. Having said that, I do think about the administration and how they do think about national security, and that includes energy security. Does this somehow grease the wheels, no pun intended, in terms of that relationship, the U.S. and Canada, to kind of figure out something a little bit more constructive?
I think it absolutely should, because the better relations we can have with Canada, the more ease of transportation of goods, services, but also the things that we need to, build oil infrastructure will be better. Canada really has no choice but to export a lot of its oil through the United States. So the United States technically imports that oil, and then a lot of it is also exported or used in the U.S. Now they do have the option to export, via ports in Vancouver. But the more that we can work with Canada and build more infrastructure and do more exchanges, the better those relations will be, and the more flexibility we'll have in terms of gasoline and energy prices in general.
One distinction I want to make, because we have a great story out on the Bloomberg too, about just reminding us that U.S. diesel rose above $5 a gallon for the first time since December of 2022 because of what we are seeing, the surging oil prices amid the war and disruption in the Middle East. We talk about diesel, its role in freight, agriculture, construction industries, and so everybody's kind of trying to juggle and manage that. What do we need to understand? I mean, we talk about energy as this bucket, but there are different pieces within that bucket.
Absolutely. And one of the reasons the diesel prices are surging is because we didn't have a lot of diesel in storage. And so we haven't had that cushion to kind of fall back on. Whereas in terms of gasoline, we had more in storage. And so we have more cushion to fall back on. But increases in diesel prices are really what reverberates throughout the economy. And that's really where we will see people who aren't buying diesel gasoline might not necessarily feel it at the pump, but diesel is what's used in trucking, it's what's used in construction. And so we will feel those increases in other ways in the economy, increases in grocery prices, for example, and other goods that need to be transported. I mean, our trucking is, I would say, the lifeblood of this country. I mean, everything is transported via trucking, essentially. And so we're going to feel that in the economy in a variety of ways.
Yeah, and I think, Carol, a complicated time, to say the least, for a midterm election.
One would think, right?
For an administration that has been so focused on affordability.